G'day and welcome back to my channel. Now, this is a video that's been requested a number of times, and I sort of was going to leave it until I started doing the rigging on the St. Louis, but I thought it'd be easy to do today because I've had a few more requests about it. And this is how to make one of these Ratline tools, okay, that I came up with. Alright, so this fits. Normally you wouldn't do it with all the rigging on. Normally you'd only have a few lines in place just to hold the mast. You wouldn't have any of your yards on, your sails, so it'd be pretty bare, and all you would do is run your shrouds up and down. These are the black lines here, right, up to the crow's nest and down here to the dead eyes and on to the channel board. And then this little fella would sneak in behind there. Okay, I can't do it now because everything's away, but roughly it goes sort of in there. And what it does then is it pushes up the horizontal rat lines against the shrouds, and all you've got to do is dab a little bit of glue on, wait till it dry, cut the thing away, pull the tool away, bingo bongo, the whole thing is done. It's very fast, it's very easy. And I tried a few of the standard methods that people use of hitching, tying little hitches. That takes forever. Or using those looms, you end up with a big floppy piece that's a bugger to put in and try and tie straight. This allows you to get all the tension right in your shrouds, so they're straight to the top over here on the fighting platform, down through to the dead eyes, tied off nice and straight, and you know that's all correct. You know your mast is angled correctly, and then all you do is you slide in your pre-rigged tool, which has the horizontal rat lines, and glue them in place, and it all cuts away and you move to the next one. It doesn't take very long at all. Alright, so this video is how to make this tool. So if you're not interested in that sort of thing, watch one of my other videos. Otherwise, if you're fascinated to know how to build one of these and make it fit your model, keep watching. Roll the music. So my first measurement has to be the largest triangle, which will be the ratline area for the main mast. So it's going to be a bit hard now with everything in the way, but I can still do it for purposes of video. It's 10, alright? So this triangle, and I'll draw a little diagram here, is 10 on the longer side. This side here is about 10 and a half. Okay, so 10 and a half. And the width of my channel board, and be generous here because you'll need a little more. So my channel board about 4 1/4. Okay, so that's my first measurement. What we'll do is we'll transfer that now to my 2mm thick styrene sheet. You could make this out of card. A bit of stiff card would work because really they pretty well only work for a particular model, particular size. When I first started designing, I thought, oh, this would be great. You'd be able to make them and they'd be universal. The trouble is the Bounty is 1/110, right? My Victory is 1/100. But the rigging tool required for both of them is completely different. The Victory is such a bigger ship that the rigging tool for the Bounty is tiny. It's about half the size of the rigging tool you would need for the Victory. And this becomes a problem. The ratline spacing is the same. This is the thing. The ratline spacing, in other words, the height between each of the rungs, right, is identical on the Victory and this Bounty, because it's the same scale. Your ratline spacing is about just over a foot, 400mm, right? 40 centimeters. And so when you work that out at 1/100 scale, they're 4mm apart. Okay, so these are all 4mm apart. And that will be true for any 1/100 scale ship. The trouble is masts can be taller, ships can be bigger, all the rest of it. You can have small ships and big ships. They all require different size ratlines, but the rungs remain the same. They're a human feature. It's a human scale. They'll always be that. So if you had a 1/150 scale ship, right, it's basically they're 3mm apart. If you've got a 1/200 scale ship, they will be 2mm apart, and so on. You go down to about a 75 scale ship and they will be 7-8mm, you know, 150 scale, and so on. You can work it out. It's just a simple scale factor. Okay, you just divide your scale into 400 and whatever number pops out, that's how high your rat lines will be from each other, distance from rungs. I've made all my measurements. I have the main mast lower section, which I showed you, and I've also done the fore and the mizzen mast, or the stern mast, right? Now, the angle is almost straight up and down for the front part of a ratline, and then it really staggers back towards the aft of the ship, and then your board is underneath, right? So that's the sort of shape we're looking for. I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's a triangle like that. It actually staggers a bit more than that in reality, but what we'll do is we'll just assume a right angle triangle for the moment to make our calculations. Now, we can't measure right up against the end here because we'll need some extra plastic for the actual arms of this thing. So this is the space, right? What these triangles are is they are the space inside the ratline tool. So we'll have to allow 5mm at least, or 10mm for, we'll allow 10. 10's a good one. We'll allow 10 at the bottom for the largest one, and then they'll come in. So that's a ruler width. We'll do that. Okay. So allow that. So that means our point for the tool is here. I don't allow any more on top because that's got to butt hard up to the crow's nest, all right? So if I allowed a bit at the top there, it would push the whole thing out, all my measurements be out. So for the moment, that has to be exactly there. All we need now is this triangle. Now, we know this length here is 10. We measured that before, so we can mark that. And I measured the base at 4.25, 4.25. So 4.25 is there. But it won't be exactly at right angles, okay? Because we have to get a 10.5 out of this diagonal one. So 10.5 from there, and you can, this is a trick where you pivot your rule until it matches up with a measurement line, right? That's how you get a triangle. So there's your 10.5. So that's it there. As you can see, it's not quite level at the base, and that's okay. That's fine. We're making a ratline tool. It's a little bit, it will sit like that. Okay, so that's how it goes. Exactly how it goes. Right. Now that I've got those two worked out, this will be my hole, but I'll have to allow 10mm at the top here for a bit of plastic. Okay, and that doesn't matter because ratlines kind of start disappearing at that point anyway. You only do the last couple, and you can do those by hand because they're so tiny. But this triangle is our first stop. Now, we'll need an extra bit here for this arm. I'm just making that the raw width for the sake of it. Now, we've got the basic shape of our ratline tool. What we need to do is round off the legs because this helps with positioning it on the model. So I found a little circle drawer there. It's a 15mm one, and that's going to be basically the round off for my legs. Okay, so there we go. So I've got the kind of shape happening, and at the top here, that will, again, I'll do a round on that. And I then draw that in. Okay, so that's the shape. So I've basically wasted off those bits. It doesn't matter. It's not a problem with this because I'm only interested in this area here being roughly about right, just so it can be positioned. So now if this gets put underneath my crow's nest, it'll sit hard up against. This here will be the point either side of that channel board. So that means my shrouds will fit nicely under there, and I'll be able to rig my rat lines across. Okay, and I'll make sure they're always level to the channel board. That's the thing. Now, a way to make this probably a little bit easier to visualize, because although I can think in abstract numbers, I know a lot of people struggle with that. That's okay. We're all built differently. Here are the actual plastic rat lines off that Bounty, right? So this one here is this one here for the mainmast. Okay, so if you have a look, it fits in there. There's a bit of a space on the bottom, and the reason is there will be the dead eyes, right? The dead eyes down there with the little pulleys. So that's how that sits there, okay? Or basically sitting in there. This space, remember, also includes the width of the channel board. The channel board is wider, so you've got to allow for that. So that's the big one, right? And then we go down to the smaller one, we measure that, we put that in. So for that one, you can see you've got a slightly different angle there. So for that one, you would need to be on that side of things, okay? So it will be there. So you could do this, you could actually put your rat lines on your board here and see what you've got, okay? So see how it works, see how it fits. So with this one, yeah, you want it level with that bottom piece, so it will be there. So we can sort of measure them up this way, and then we'd need probably, it's going to be one of these, it's probably that one. The ones there for the mizzen mast, that was about right, they were like that. So for those, it would need to be like so. So this will give you the shape, and that is what we're going to cut and what we're going to make. That's going to be the mizzen mast, that's for the main mast, and that one's for the forward mast. And it will work, and it'll give you all of the different pieces, okay? So when that is all cut up, it'll look like this. Let me go into how I put all that together. So the next thing I do is I add the measurements for the smaller one, and that's the foremast. So that's 9, 9.5, and 3.75. So we can use this rule. 9 from that pivotal point at the top, remember, because we can't go any higher than that. So 9 on the shorter side. So 9. And then 9.5 on the longer side. 9.5. Now this section here only needs to be 3.75, so it's just under. So that's the case, still within tolerances. That'll be fine. We'll get away with that. So that will sit nicely just outside of the channel board for my smaller rat lines, okay, in my foremast. And they will sit again pretty well on this triangle because I've drawn my little lines and they're fine. They fit very nicely. The 9 fits on that edge and the 9.5 there, so that's fine. Good. And that's kind of what happens. Usually those two fit really well together in the shape. Now we go to the mizzen mast, and I've got 8, 8 and 2, so it's a little bit different. Now your mizzen mast is a very small one, but again it needs to be level with the channel board, so we'll put that line in straight away. Okay, so these three all have to be level because we're going to put notches in here and they must all match up and they must be all level the way through. So this mizzen mast is kind of strange, is that it's 8 and 8 for mine. So 8, yeah, I've already measured that. So another 8, yep. So it's 2 wide. There we go. So it will fit within the bounds of what I've done here. Okay. You'll just sort of, when you put it on the model, it'll be hanging over the side a little bit. But it'll still, this is the forward part. That will always sit hard up against your channel board. Okay. So we could add a bit of plastic in there if we wanted to. And so we could do that. We could basically add just that little bit in there. That would make it an absolutely perfect fit. Okay. So then we know that'll hit up against channel board there. That one was fine. The difference between those two actually was along our diagonal line. So that was 4.5 and that was 3 3/4. So they were fine. All right, so I hope you followed that. What I'll do is I'll mark out the waist now. So you can see these are the bits we don't need. All right, and here. So that's our shape. I'll start cutting it out, it might make a bit more sense. have the basic shape. There it is. And all I've got to do is tidy up some of these ends. Now I can cut those corners. I've already marked them. So I can cut to those circles, curves or whatever, semicircles. Showing this in other videos how you can easily make a curve just by cutting out little bits to the line, and then I'll sand that smooth shortly. And the same with the one at the bottom, I can sand that smooth. I've got this little piece here to cut out, so I'll just do that and then sand this up, and then I'll show you how we put the parts on that are going to make it into the Rat Harp. Just a final sand around the edges. We're only doing that so that this is not going to catch on any lines or rip anything. It's just, well, it's just making a reasonably quality tool. So I'll probably give it another sand before I finish. But there's our basic shape. Yeah, it's a bit different to the first Ratline tool I made because I realised I could improve it. So here we go. Now that will fit in there, right? That's what it's designed to do. A bit hard at the moment because the foothooks are in there. You can't see. The foothooks are in there. They're getting in the way. This is the thing, you know, chicken before egg. You can't put the foothooks in until you've got the ratlines in. The foothooks go from the ratlines up to the edge of the fighting platform. So they really get in the way if you've got a tool. So again, you need to do this first. Everything in order. So that will fit nicely into there when you haven't got a mast in the way and you haven't got a yard in the way, okay? And it will fit very nicely into the front one as well. It's measured to fit, all right? So what we need to do now is set it up so you can put in those horizontal ratlines, because remember, we're assuming that you have already rigged your shrouds. They were part of basic rigging back when there's nothing much else on here except for some forward stays. So then this tool sneaks in nicely because there's nothing in the way, and it's going to allow us to get totally level ratlines, because you can see my ratlines perfectly level. They're a piece of cake to put on. They weren't knotted, they just glued into position, and I think you'd have to say they look great. I think they do. They look fine with this scale and what I'm doing. You can use this tool to knot as well. You can use this tool. I made one for a guy who was doing a 1/72 scale ship, and he would be knotting it. But this allowed him to put it up there in the section of the mast, lock it in, and know that he was running from groove to groove. So let's look at how I've got to do those grooves. The other thing that makes sure that the ratlines are level. So what I need to do now is work out position for all the horizontal lines that I mark on here, which will be basically the guides for the ratlines. We'll put little grooves down the side. Now to work them out, I need first to know, well, where do they start? And that's pretty easy to do. I've got my rule and I've gone in and I've measured on the model how far from the crow's nest down to the top of my very first channel, because my first ratline will start just above that. So when I measured that, it was 8.5. Okay, so 8.5 would be a good point to start. So, knowing that my feet should be level, right? My feet give me the idea of where that channel board should be, which is level. And there's the one for that's the main mast, the mizzen, the foremast, and then the mizzen mast is up here, right? Main, fore, mizzen. Okay, they only step apart like that. So I've measured that now, and I know from the very tip where the crow's nest is going to bump down, it is 9.5, 8.5. So that is where my first ratline will go, because here are dead eyes and the channel board is there, right? So you've got to imagine there's channel board there, then you've got a series of dead eyes, and then the shrouds go up, and now we have our ratlines. So with that level, we'll mark off our very first one level with our cutting mat. Okay, so having the cutting mat guide is rather handy. We'll mark that off. So that's our very first one. It's best to use the front side, right, the part to the bow, to do your measurements, because that's the one that's most vertical. I know it's tilted a little bit, but it's the one that's most vertical, and we can get those foot and a bit, 400mm measurements to scale. As I say, this is a 1/100 scale kit, or 1:110. So they're going to be 4mm. So you just simply divide that 100 into 400, or 110 to 400, and you roughly get 4. Okay, 400's in 400. Easy as that. So we've got to make some 4mm marks. So we've got 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. You can count along at home. See if I get it right. Okay, so I've done them all, but probably, well, you might just get a Ratline there. Pretty well as you get just up to underneath that crow's nest, it's really hard anyway for this tool to work. And I found the last couple that are 8 tiny little things, I kind of just cut them to shape and glued them on underneath there by hand. They really weren't that hard. What I also do is, all right, we know that's the starting point, where we assume, okay, but it might be worth adding a couple more just in case they want to slide this up and down, or, you know, you never know what's going to happen. Better to have them now than when you go to use this and go, oh bugger, I'm going to need some more points, and it's a little harder to cut them once I've put the rest of the stuff on here. So let's do that. We'll just add 2 more. All right, so we'll add 2 more of those guys. That's just given us a little more wriggle room, even though we believe that is the point for the top of the dead eyes. Okay, well, what I've got to do now is those lines need to be marked out horizontally to here. So this is the part where you've got to get it absolutely spot on. So I need to know the corresponding ones here. So I'll just put those on, and then I'll basically join them all up, and we'll get to the next part. Now, marking the points here, they're not going to be exactly 4, because remember, this side was 10 and this side was 10.5. So it is that tiny little percentage more. So if you tried to mark them all as 4s, you'll find they all kind of fan in, and it doesn't work. So this is where you've got to know where your start and your end is. So that's what I already did. I measured that was level to there, and that was level to there. So you can work off those, and you might work a few other points that you can see. So there's one that's level across there. Okay, so I'll continue on with that using my cutting board as a way for me to make sure I keep getting them level. Now I've got all my lines in, and I'll use a little saw to cut in and mark all of those. But what I need to do is, as I found when I was basically rigging, to make sure you don't lose your level, get confused, I found if every 5th one you made bigger, so there's going to be tiny notches for your Ratline cordage, but every 5th one I'm going to put a V, just a little bit deeper, because it doesn't matter if they go in a bit deeper, it doesn't make any difference, because you're only working in that inside triangle, right? So every 5th one I'm going to cut out with a slightly different V. So a bit tidy up there, and that is the first one. Well, as I say, we think it'll probably be about that one where really you'll be doing the rat lines for the main mast. But the thing can slide up and down, and you never know what's going to happen. It might be slightly different too when we get to the other, the forward mast and the other one. So having those little 2 extra ones will help. My rigging tool is all cut out now. It's probably easy to see on that side. You can see how those notches help you know that you're aligned, that you don't get lost and miss one. So you should always line up to there. So if you're working your way up and suddenly they don't line up, you've made a mistake somewhere, and you can correct it within 5. So, well, I think I did them every 4. Now, what you also need is, when you're running your thread through this to do the rat lines, you need a point at the beginning to tie it off, and you need a point at the end to tie it off. So I'll just draw some holes there, and I just put those in the middle, roughly. And I can probably bore that out a bit. You won't need it very big because Ratline is fairly thin. I mean, your shrouds are reasonable size. They will be 1/2 of 1/6 the size of the mast. Yeah, because your main stays, your forward stays, right, they're 1/6 the diameter of the mast, and then your shrouds are half that. So they're 1/12. So if you've got a 6mm mast, which is quite common on a kit about this size, you've got 1mm stays, forward stays, right? And then you've got 0.5mm shrouds. And then you're going to go down about half that, ish. So you're going to need about 1/4 of a millimetre, or 0.3 of a millimetre is the cordage you'll need to do your ratlines. They are very thin. So one there, and I'll put one here as well, at the top where you end. So you've got a start and an end. So you tie off from those two. I've shown how to actually rig this thing and how to use it. So that will be in another video. That well, it is another video. I'll give you a link to that one. That's what I'm trying to say. Put your teeth in, Harry Houdini. So I'll give you a link to that because I'm not going to go over that again. This is just because people have asked how to make this. So okay, looks nearly done. One thing missing. What I found when I first built it is it was just flat like this. It was a bit of a problem trying to prop it up against the shrouds. You really needed some spring in it. So I realised what you need is a couple of little ridges along here and on both sides, because this is reversible. I mean, this would be for the port side, and then you turn it over and you can do the starboard side. So that's how it gets rigged together. And the advantage of this tool that I found, and what I really like about it, is that, well, not only you haven't wasted so much cordage, but this now allows you to pop it behind your shrouds, which you can rig on your model, so they're all rigged, tensioned correctly in place, which is so much easier to do, right? And then this just slips in behind them, and the spring or the little ridges here push it up. You've got to make sure you've got the right side, so you've got to make sure that to that is the correct side. If it's level across there, that side you're going to waste. That's all wasted and throw it away. But you sort of, that happens with the other rigging tools as well. There's always quite a bit of waste. So you're only really worrying about this side. So that goes underneath. The shrouds go over the top of that. It's pushed up against it because you click it in under the crow's nest, click it down there onto the channel board, and it works so well. I show that in the video for the Bounty where I actually used the first version of this tool. Principle is still the same. This tool is just probably a lot more efficient. That's all. So I'm showing you Mark II, but the way to use it is the same as Mark I. Anyhow, look, I hope this video might have been of some interest to you, and I know there's many who have asked about this tool and how to do it, so there it is. So yeah, for those few that managed to stay to the end because they're interested in what this is all about, there you go. And please go to the video. You'll see a clicky thing at the end of this, and that video will be the one it'll say for the rigging tool. Go to it. It's also in the description. Okay, well that's it. It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini.